Richard Forman, and it's a real honor to be here at the Congress. And I had the honor to give the opening talk at the Congress or a meeting 10 years ago. And I wish I could be with you to share your food and your company and your culture and the natural areas around. I think that Brazil and indeed Latin America and the Mediterranean are just the ideal places for road ecology. And so I honor each of you and I look forward to the work you're doing. And I know it's important and crucial. I was asked to talk about some of the ideas for future work, and I'm going to do that, but I'm going to also talk about some wildlife structures where they're clustered together and in a short space along roads there in North America and in Central America. And so let's start and get your pens out and we'll see if we can get this. All right. So I wanted to include in this presentation some of the ideas, some interesting ideas and opportunities for road ecology, both the academic and the theoretical, conceptual, and the applications to roads and highways in different parts of the world. So I'm going to start with these first two right down here, B1 and 2, having to do with wildlife mitigation and the roadbed. And then I'm going to switch to some actual empirical data, although they're based on volunteer scientists in the USA and in Costa Rica. And then I'm going to end up down here in the last two, roadsides and the road effect zone and the landscape perspective. So let's see where we go here. So here we are, road ecology ahead. Number one, wildlife mitigation. There'll be four of these, two at the beginning and two at the end. So an objective I got number two there, it's not good. Let's go back here. Number one, objective determination of priority wildlife crossing structures. So if you have a state or a province or some large area, usually wildlife crossing structures are put where there's some political pressure or somebody has a favorite place or somebody has some data from that place. And it seems to me for society, it would be better to have a little more objective way of choosing wildlife crossing structures. And so my suggestion is that you basically get the preliminary evidence and the rationale for each possible place. In other words, you're making a list of all those, and that's done already probably, but maybe this would be done by some expert group in transportation agency, conservation entity, road ecologists, maybe the public. And then go through that and put them in three categories. Put them in a priority, high priority, and highest priority category. And usually putting them in categories is better than making a ranked list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because the decision makers, they don't want to be stuck with a list that's saying this is number one, that's number two, and the decision maker say, yeah, I'm going to do number 3, and then people criticize that. But if you have a priority categories, the priority high and highest, then you can focus on the highest priority, and there are options there that other considerations may play an important role, like funding, like neighborhood support and things like that. And then finally, after maybe 5-year intervals, reevaluate and revise based on new information. So the basic idea here is we want more wildlife crossing structures, but rather than it being based on politics and other things, it would be better that it has a more objective approach. The second idea here, second area, is we need some wildlife overpasses. And at present, they're heavy and expensive. And the way to make them inexpensive is to make them lightweight. And then we have many more overpasses, and they would be more an option for transportation agencies there, because there's some wildlife that there's a lot of wildlife prefer going over overpasses, according to the data from Canada. So structures that are somewhat analogous to those for children, their schools or shoppers near malls, they're real lightweight and safe. And the way you do that, the problem of the reason we have heavy ones is that the water is so heavy in soil. So basically, they use a lightweight sandy soil, very porous, maybe 30 centimeters thick, for example, with perforated pipes beneath to drain water away on the overpasses, and then cover them with some drought-resistant grasses or low shrubs and so forth. And then where you want to have tall shrubs or even small trees that have scattered low mounds or ridges that support tall shrubs or small trees. These could be a meter thick or whatever seems appropriate there. But the basic idea is to address that issue of weight of water with the light sandy soil and drought resistant plants there. Incidentally, I've been on a roof, what do they call it? Green roof in Switzerland, where they had patches of little mounds on the top on this green roof. And again, weight is a problem. And they had different thicknesses of soil, and they had totally different species there. So it's a very high diverse meadow up there. The third issue is wildlife corridors crossing at ground level, at grade. And this is complicated, but because it requires modifying animal behavior, but also driver behavior. And they're especially appropriate for 2-lane roads with fast traffic, which is where most roadkill rates tend to be highest there. And it's sort of analogous to school crossings for children, only it's used in discrete locations, maybe 100 meters to 1,000 meters in length, where they're documented wildlife crossing stretches. You know, those signs that say wildlife in the next 10 kilometers are not very useful. But in a very distinct zone here, that would be a good place for these wildlife crossings. And using drift fences. The drift fences are the fences that go diagonally away from the road, and they funnel animals to the crossing. Ornithologists use that for trapping birds, and others use it. So, but the idea of diagonal fences extending outward is a good way to funnel animals to that crossing. And drivers are, the way you affect drivers then, they're slowed by making a perceived narrows in the road ahead. In other words, when you're driving, you see a narrows, you slow down. Lots of studies that show that. And it doesn't actually, and so you can use shrubs and trees and buildings, other structures, but it's really the perceived narrow. It's what the driver thinks is ahead. You don't actually have to have a narrow between two buildings or two sets of trees. You can use signage and lines and various things. So the driver perceives the place is narrower there. So that's the third area there that I would mention. And let me go on to 3 more. Namely, these 3 have to do with the roadbed. A roadbed, whenever there's a roadbed, bridge, or culvert repair or replacement, that's an opportunity. That's a cost-effective time to address other goals of society affected by transportation. In other words, here's some examples. Reduce flooding, erosion, and sedimentation at the same time we're making a better roadbed or a better culvert or bridge. Enhance fish movement, include walking trails, biking trails, reconnect communities that have been split by a road. All of these are things that are particularly, can be cost effectively added whenever you do a roadbed modification or bridge. Reduce traffic noise and other pollutants in low-income neighborhoods. So that's an opportunity. You're going to repair something or replace something, and you can address other things at the same time. Next, the road beds are perforated with pipes in low areas, that are low elevation areas, and that improves flows and natural conditions of both the upslope side and the downslope side of the road. Here again, some examples: more natural groundwater, water tables, and areas of wetland. In other words, when a road goes through and it serves as a partial barrier, then the wetland on the lower side tends to shrink and the wetland on the upper side tends to expand, and there are other problems there. But this will tend to make it more natural groundwater, water tables, and areas of wetland. Fewer flooded or washed out roads. You facilitate movement of fish and other aquatics. Enhanced amphibian, small mammal movements get through this. And just incidentally, gas companies, that the gas pipelines, they routinely drill and insert horizontal pipes under roads and other areas. So in the Netherlands, they've done a lot of this using for small mammals, getting the gas company to drill horizontally under the road. Very effective way of doing this. So this is particularly useful in low areas there. And it removes a lot of the barrier effect. And finally, flooding from roads on slopes. If you have a road on a slope, going down a slope, let's say to enter a town or whatever, a series of elongated basins, sequence of stormwater basins is a very effective way of minimizing the amount and the velocity of water flowing downstream into that town or into something else there. Minimize erosion, sedimentation, and recharges groundwater. And if you use bioretention basins, they also can treat water pollutants there. So these are ideas that I think we all could gain from, and road ecologists are probably the best people to work with transportation and other agencies and organizations. Now, let me switch to some actual places. This first one is in Massachusetts, west of Boston, the USA. And this is about 2.5 kilometers, this road. It's a 4-lane road with about 50,000 vehicles per day going along here. And this is a pre-treatment, pre-underpass, there's a pre-underpass data. And each of these is a different wildlife species there, and it's showing where they are based on tracking. And some going across, one actually a deer that was killed right here during the study. And so I want to show you right here, this little red mark. That's going to be wildlife underpass number 1. There are 5 of them. Here's number 1. And there's not a stream going through there. It's just dry, open. I'll show you a picture in a moment. That's number 1. You see there's a lot of wildlife in this area. And number 5, the most recent one, is right here. And then I'll show you that with some more data there. And number 2, 3, and 4 are up here. And we're actually building number 6 right at the moment. Here's number 1. The 4-lane road up there, a lot of traffic. You're looking through, this is a little bit less than 2 meters vertically. It's a little bit less than 3 meters this way. And I've never measured the distance here, but I suspect it's around 35 meters, something like that, underneath. And it took 3 months to build. Here's the other side of it. They built in 3 months without blocking traffic, because they worked at night usually there. So here are this is underpass number 2. Here's underpass number 3 and number 4. And this area is floodplain here for that river there. So now there's some animals in the underpasses. There's a squirrel up here and a blue jay, a bird down here. And in some of the data, I'll emphasize that this is present. So these animals are present in here. and some it's animals that successfully crossed underneath. Those are different. Here's a deer up here. There's a fox there, a gray fox there in the lower area. There's a red fox. And there's a coyote. Here's a weasel and a rabbit. This is a predator too. And here's a fisher. It's a bigger predator here. So first image is a rate of crossing through all tunnels combined. Now that's based on the first 4 tunnels, based on camera data. So these are images that were taken by the remote controlled camera, infrared camera there in the middle. Procyon, the raccoon, was by far the most abundant animal going through these 4 tunnels or underpasses. Others were squirrel, red fox, chipmunk, those small animal, and fisher and deer there. So this is average for all 4 of the first 4 underpasses. Now let me break that down a little bit. Here we are. Here's tunnel number 1 and tunnel number 3 here. And so the first is Procyon, the raccoon there, and it's abundant in both tunnels. It's abundant in all the tunnels. But notice then the next one here, this species, number 2, is common here, abundant here, and not abundant there. The number 3 is abundant here and not here. Number 4 is abundant here and not here. Number 6 is abundant up here and not down here. Number 7 is abundant here and not up there. So basically, this tunnel is carrying a very different fauna through than this tunnel. And when you average them, then of course that difference disappears there. But so one tunnel is going to get a very distinct subset of the fauna there in abundance, at least. Here's a rough diagram of home range sizes, and I'm just going to say very small home range is less than 1 hectare. And this is the median size for the data we have here. A small is 1 to 10 hectares. A medium is 10 to 100 hectares. Large is 100 to 1,000 hectares, and very large is 1,000 to greater than 1,000 hectares there. And so I picked median numbers for the species involved there to illustrate it. And down here, this is the Massachusetts road highway, 4 lanes, 50,000 vehicles per day. It's 8 kilometers long. In other words, it's a very distinct area, 8 kilometers long, and it has 5 wildlife crossings here. The 6th one is being built right here today. And there are also 2 railroad underpasses here, although we don't have any data for those there. So that shows you the overview. Now, here are the first 4 tunnels are there, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I want to show you here is that there's a small home range animal. There's a medium home range and a couple of large home range animals that are in abundance. Here, there's also a small, medium, and large home range animals in abundance. Here also small, medium, and large home range animals in abundance, and also here small, medium range. In other words, even though, as I showed you in the last slide, or 2 slides back, the fauna that goes through one is very different than the fauna that goes through next. The types of animals based on home range sizes are rather similar. That is, they're large, medium, small, going through all 4 of the tunnels. So how many wildlife crossing structures are good for a locale or needed for a location? Yeah, that's a hard question. So let's think about one way of getting at that based using these data. If you wanted to have 95% or more of the fauna, 26 species in the study, recorded in the underpasses, that's to get 95%. What we've done is we've plotted the 19 possible species area curves. And what that means is how many species went through in tunnel number 1, and then how many extra species, how many new species appeared in tunnel number 2. And then after that, how many new species in tunnel number 3, and how many new species in tunnel number 4. And if we had one and then how many species, first another species area code would be how many in number 2, how many new in 3, new in 4, new in 1, and then 3, 4, 1, and 2, and so on. One underpass only achieves the 95% of the fauna in 1/3 of the cases, 1/3 of the possible species area code. In other words, if you randomize those, the order of those, then you get one underpass, you would get the bulk of the species in 1/3 of the cases. 2 underpasses would get it in half the cases, 3 3/4 of the cases there. So these data suggest that more than 3 wildlife crossing structures would be needed to get 95% or more of the fauna there. You say, well, more than 3, can we do any better than that? Well, here's another approach. How about putting all your eggs in one basket? If you put them in 2 baskets, you gain a lot. If you put them in 3 baskets, you still have a pretty big gain. But there's very little gain in putting them in more than 4 or 5 baskets. So probably 3 to 4 structures, wildlife crossing structures, is the answer to that question there. Though you can see these are fairly indirect ways of getting out that. So now let's go to underpass number 5 here, right here. This is the newer one. And it's a little bit about a kilometer to the northeast of this number 1 here. There's a pond on one side and woods on the other, stream going by nearby. And the underpass is right up there, and the stream is down here where the photo is taken. This is looking through it. It's a little bit shorter vertically. The horizontal is the same. Distance is about the same. Here's a top predator. This is the bobcat and lynx in there nearby. And so now I want to talk about wildlife presence. Now this is just presence. They're in the tunnel and they're picked up by tracks or camera. And this is tunnel number 5. This is only the first year. The next slide, I'll vary that a little bit. So remember, home range is small, less than 10 hectares, medium, 10 to 100, and so forth. All right, so here we have some animals, some small home range animals going up here, some medium home range, some large, and I've included a very large, that bobcat. The bobcat actually was photographed in there before the study started. We were setting up the cameras and it was photographed in there about a month and a half after the structures were built. So the bobcat came in right away. Okay, so there are track beds at the north end of that. Let's go back here. There's a track bed. This is the south end. And there's a track bed in the middle, and there's a track bed at the north end. There's also a camera at the south end, a camera in the middle, and a camera at the north end. Here's the track bed data, north, middle, and south, and the camera data, north, middle, and south. And what you'll notice is for the small home range animals, these things, not surprisingly, there are a lot that are picked up on track bed and very few in the camera bed there. They're small animals, the camera misses them, the camera's too high. But for the medium and large, the rest of these, there's no real significance difference between the track bed numbers and the camera bed camera numbers there. So that the big difference is in the small animals here. And notice again that this is the presence of the animals in the underpasses. Now, this is different. This is a successful tunnel crossing. So that's with simply presence. This is, remember we have cameras and tracks at both ends and in the middle. So the small, medium, large, and you'll notice these numbers are much smaller, much lower numbers here of animals that crossed. There, well, that's not, here you see much larger numbers here and larger there at the bottom. It's here 528, 377, and here we're a lot less than that. So there are a lot of animals in these crossings, but their numbers are rather low for going all the way through 35 meters. There, this is year one. Now let's look at, this is year 1, 2, and 3. The number of animal crossings with camera data is 33 right there. And in year 2, it doubled. In year 3, it doubled again there. So at least in the first 3 years, the number of animals, and these, remember, are the mid-size and large animals, it continues to increase. The number of species, unlike the number of animals, the number of species, camera, very low. It increased and then stayed the same after that. So the increase took place in the first year, the number of species. And then the number of species crossings with track data, which have the small animals in it, and the large animals, there was no difference. It didn't change over that time. So basically, the animals are learning. They are increasingly using it. There are numbers of animals that are crossing there in the first 3 years. The number of species doesn't change much after the second year. All right, I just show you, this is a amphibian and reptile crossing nearby. We don't have data for this. It's very new, relatively new. And that's what it looks like going through from the side, and the wetland on both sides. And that's what it looks like to the driver. The crossing is right there. All right, now I'll go to another part of the world. I'll go to Costa Rica. And here's the Pacific Ocean on this side. Here's Panama. Here's Caribbean. Here's Nicaragua. And here's San Jose, the capital. And here's Corcovado, the big conservation area, protected area. And where we're going is right here along near the Pacific there, the Hacienda Baru. And that's what it looks like. This area along here, there is Hacienda Baru. And this is the work that Jack Ewing has done. A few of the animals down there. Capuchin or white-faced monkey here is an omnivore. The coati is an omnivore. One of the sloths here is a herbivore there. So again, remember these home ranges here. In this case, we do have some very large home ranges there, some animals with very large home ranges, which over 1,000 hectares. So here are what the underpasses. What I'm going to show you is they have 3 different types of structures down here. One of the underpasses, the most extensive one, there are 21 underpasses in 2.5 kilometers of 2-lane road. So there are a lot more underpasses per kilometer than in the previous study in Massachusetts. So they're actually, they average about 120 meters apart. So they're pretty close together. And then the size and so forth. These are regularly used species. In other words, they say these are species that use it all the time. And it's a long-term data set, 9-10 years there. And the same home ranges we're using. So here's some small home range species. They're small. The possum, armadillo, goody. And they're omnivores and herbivores. Here are a couple of middle-sized, medium ones, omnivore and a predator. And here are some large home range species, large right here, omnivores and predators. And then some very large home range species, and they're all predators here. And so this group includes the capuchin monkey, I showed, and the coati. but also peccary and skunk. And then this group includes the ocelot, jaguarundi, and puma. By the way, the puma was never photographed going through or seen, but they had one tracking record there only. So that's those are the underpasses. The second one are canopy bridges, a different structure. And what these are, they're like ladders, like horizontal ladders with a net over them. So this is the length on the order of 30, 35 meters long from one side of the road to the other. Each bridge has got two cables that make the ladder with cross bars, and they're covered with a plastic netting. And there's a third cable about 30 centimeters above the net, which helps monkeys use it. Again, they're fairly long-term data. And small home range herbivores here, 3 of them, medium home range, mixed feeding, and then the large omnivores at the bottom. And what I want to show you is that there are these asterisks are not species not recorded in the underpasses. These 3 are not recorded in the underpasses, and those 3 are not recorded in the underpasses. So 6 out of 9 of these species are not in the underpasses. These canopy bridges are facilitating the movement of quite a different fauna than are the underpasses. And then the third structure is a zigzag rope canopy bridge. And basically what this is, a big thick rope, like to tie ships to a dock, is zigzag back and forth over a 200-meter long driveway. And it's connected to forest patches at each end. And this is newer, only observations for about 2 years. And in this case, the small animals here and some medium and one large home range animal, most of them are herbivores. There's some omnivores and a predator here. But again, here, 1, 2, 3 species are not recorded in either of the other 2 situations. So again, this is providing a way of getting across the road that the other 2 aren't. The other 2 structures are not. So, and summarizing that, crossing structure type, 3 different types: underpass, ladder bridge, and zigzag bridge. 3 species are using all 3 of them. One species, the possum, the monkey, the capuchin, Tamanundua, is mostly a predator, though does eat a lot of plant material sometimes. Coati is also, I'm sorry, the coati crosses on the first 2. There are 3 species that cross on the 2 upper ones, and 11 species only cross in the underpass. 2 only cross in this, and 3 only cross on the zigzag bridge. So, and this could be 16, including the puma. So, in a sense, what this is saying is that if we just have one type of crossing structure, we're going to be missing a lot of the fauna. We're going to be the road will be a barrier to, or a filter to, crossing by many species. So 3 or 4 wildlife crossings at a place for most of the fauna to cross. That is 95% or more there. That's how many. One crossing type benefits certain species, but the fauna as a whole requires at least 3 different crossing types here. In other words, a significant gain by adding the third type, the second type, and the third type. Now, the relative distance between crossing structures, we don't have, I've got a bunch of question marks there. The distance between crossing structures, it seems to me the way to get at that is to think about dispersal distances of the species. And maybe medium home range species are the ones to focus on, the medium home range size species. The small species, that is the small home range species, if they're right next to the underpass, they can cross, but the distances are beyond their home ranges. So it's unlikely that many of these species are going to want to forage on both sides there. It's possible, but it's unlikely. And they're probably going to be near underpass wherever you put it. Some of them are going to be near an underpass. The small species, the large home range species there have home ranges that exceed the distances between underpasses. So they're apt to be able to cross almost in any case, the large home range. So that kind of leads me to thinking the medium home range species are the ones to work with. And then the idea that in animal dispersal, the species, the young, the subadult males and females disperse out to find a mate and establish a new home range. But they tend to, there are exceptions, but tend to exclude the diameter area of their original home range out. In other words, if the original home range they grew up in was, let's say, 300 meters, then they're going to go more than 300 meters beyond where the old mama and papa live before they set up their home range. That way they don't end up competing too much with the mama and papa. So I think that's a helpful consideration if you think about then the distance from the center of a home range to outward to where they might set up. The distance apart of the crossing structures might be 2 or 3 times, 2 to 4 times their home range diameters. I don't know. So I'll leave that for you and future researchers to figure out. That's where I am on this. Now, let me finish up here with some more ideas, suggestions for areas that would be really helpful to work on in the future. So here's road ecology head number 3, roadsides in the road effect zone. Maintain variegated roadsides. Drivers always say how boring roadsides are, and they don't have to be that way. But you could address many, many goals of society in roadsides. There are places in food production. I've seen in many countries of Latin America where there are cows and horses and so on tied to posts in the roadsides. Culture and nature education for drivers. In other words, in France, a lot of signage that help people understand the land, the landscape, and the animals around it. Reduce light dissemination outward. And lights at night, if the temperature is warm enough, they kill an enormous number of insects. Good German data on this and others elsewhere, flying insects there. Walking trails along the outer edge of roadsides. You cut noise dissemination with soil berms and other structure. Reduce or redirect wind there. Wind is nice because you can bend it. And in this process here, you use guardrails and fencing in creative ways. So variegated roadsides is just such a wonderful opportunity, and it's so visible. It's high real estate area and a real opportunity. Woody roadside vegetation. Here's a controversial one. Woody roadside vegetation, carefully managed, can produce many ecological and other benefits for society. For example, low shrubs or high shrubs, maybe even trees. Shade ditches, roadside ditches, so that the sun-warmed water in those ditches doesn't enter nearby water bodies, cool water bodies, which would reduce oxygen and fish. Increase semi-natural habitat and therefore increase wildlife. In other words, if there was more useful habitat in roadsides, there'd be more wildlife. Reduce the barrier effect of the road and hence habitat fragmentation. In other words, easier for wildlife to cross where the roadside has got some woody stuff. Decrease the outward spread of water and airborne pollutants. So basically, there's downsides of this, and there are downsides of all of these, but the pluses outnumber the minuses in my judgment. And then the road effect zone, I suspect many of you are familiar with this, highlights the area adjoining a road significantly affected by the road and traffic. And this zone, what it does basically, it balances the landscape ecology flows across the land with the narrow, rigorous roadside hydrologic and safety issues there. It says, here is a zone with a convoluted boundary that is affected by the road and the traffic, and anything beyond it is not. And therefore, the road effect zone delimits the area that transportation planning needs to deal with. And everything beyond this zone is society's responsibility, the landowners. Finally, the number 4, the landscape perspective. Road networks and segments are appropriate scale for combining transportation, natural resources planning. Networks contain both barriers and enclosures there. And so road network is obvious. Segments are the stretches of road between intersections or between villages, for example, there. And instead of only working at the site, at this individual site, think about a road segment, or better still, think about road networks, in the words. And so these barriers and enclosures, this affects interior species, road networks, fire ignition, road networks and fire ignition spread and control, stream networks and road networks interact strongly for water flow, quantity, and quality, and recreational trail system. All of these are really important to society and nature, and road networks are really the place to focus on those, and segments also. Removal or closure of low, see, we're at the landscape perspective now, broad. Removal or closure of low usage roads, especially beneficial where they bisect a large natural area. Removing one road, one low usage road bisecting a natural area in every local town and county would have a huge cumulative effect for nature. For example, reconnect the two parts to reestablish large habitat with its valuable large interior habitat. Accelerate vegetation regrowth or reduce the barrier effect, produce continuous vegetation, eliminate the vehicles and their noise, and reduce human impacts in the center of a large natural area. Finally, in planning road networks for future wildlife, in other words, planning road networks for future wildlife, requires focusing on how the pattern of large natural areas is likely to be decades in the future. You think, wait a minute, nobody does that. Well, we should be doing that. And the way I think way to do it is to map the large green areas in the broad landscape today that are key habitats for and sources of wildlife. All right, that's easy. Highlight the existing green areas with long-term protection and the likely green space patterns decades ahead. In other words, what if some decades ahead, what is the pattern of large green spaces likely to be? That's what you want to focus on. And once we've got that, then instead of planning solutions for today's wildlife for today's wildlife crossings, for example, today we often will base it on tracking or on roadkill statistics. Plan future wildlife corridors that connect the likely pattern of future large green spaces. Now you see why figuring out the future large green space pattern is so important, because then you can figure out where the wildlife corridors that will connect those future ones should be. And that's where we want to focus our attention on mitigation and other structures. So, road ecology has lots of opportunities ahead, and I've put these into 4 main categories: wildlife mitigation, roadbed, roadsides, the road effect zone, the landscape structure, landscape perspective. And I thank you very much and I look forward to seeing more road ecology work that comes out of your conference. All the best.